Hey, this is René. Welcome to another video on this channel, and in this video I will show you how you can use any custom indicator that you find in the market or in any forum and turn its signals into trades in MetaTrader 5. So I will walk you through the whole process, starting at the very first step, like installing a custom indicator or downloading a custom indicator, then having a look at this indicator and figuring out how the signals are created. And then in the end, we will take these signals and write a expert advisor, a automated program in the MetaTrader 5 that then automatically trades these signals taken from this indicator. So what we will do first here is we will download a indicator from the market. And if you're in the MetaTrader 5, on the left side you will see the navigator, and if you do not see it, you can click on View Navigator or press Ctrl+N. And if you open this market section here, you can click on Indicators. And there you will have a lot of indicators. In this case, we will search for a free indicator. And yeah, you can then just choose any of these indicators pretty much. In this case, we will choose, for example, I think it's on the third page for me, this arrow zigzag indicator. And you can then click on free and you can download it directly in the MetaTrader 5 platform. And you will see now it automatically added this market section or folder here in the indicators section. So not in this market section, this is just for downloading stuff and searching for stuff. But now we will see this arrow zigzag indicator here under our indicators. So in this market subfolder. And we can now attach it to any chart like this. And this will then automatically apply the indicator to the chart. And yeah, this is it already. So what we can do, what we can see here is, this is pretty much the zigzag indicator. It has, I think, 1 or 2 inputs. Let's have a look at this indicator list, arrow zigzag. Yeah, we have this input depth, deviation, and backstep. And yeah, we can modify these, and then we will see these like trends with the trend lines and the arrows that signal a buy or sell signal. And we can also use this indicator in the tester. And this is usually the next step that I would always recommend if you work with a new indicator. So open the strategy tester. You can do this again by clicking on View Strategy Tester. And then if you click on Overview, you can test a indicator. And this is what we will do. So we can choose a indicator here, and we will see that there is this market subfolder, and we can open it, and we should find this arrow zigzag now. And then we can also change the inputs, but we do not want to do this because we just want to have a look at the indicator and how it works in real time, or in this case in a demonstration with historical data. But this will help us understand how the indicator works. And what we can see here is, for example, this last arrow here, it appears under the current bar. And when the bar moves further downwards, we will see that this arrow also moves down. And yeah, this is what we can see here, for example. So the last arrow is not set. It can always change if there is a lower low in this case, or a higher high, of course, for the red arrows that point south. So this already tells us that the last arrow, so this arrow at the very right side, this is not really a reliable trading signal, because this may always change. So in this case, for example, for this zigzag indicator, I would not recommend using this last arrow as soon as it appears. But instead of this, I would wait for a new arrow to appear. For example, this one appears here. And then once this arrow appeared, we can be pretty sure that this green arrow will not be modified again. So at the moment, or in the moment when this red arrow here appears, we can take the previous arrow, which was this green arrow, and execute a trade because this arrow, because of this arrow. So we will make our buy trade here and not here. And this is for many indicators that are so-called repainting indicators, because they can always change their signals and this is not really reliable. So you will have to figure out at what point a arrow, for example, will stay there and will not be modified again by the indicator. This is really important. So so since we figured this out, we can now have a look at the programming part. So what we'll do here is we will close this strategy tester and we will jump into the IDE, which is the integrated development environment, which is the meta editor. And then we will click on experts and we will simply create a new expert by clicking on new in the upper left corner. So we will name this program zigzag expert, for example. You may choose any other name. Then we click on next, next, and finish. And once you did this, this will create like a new expert advisor. We can delete all these gray lines and the properties at the top because these lines do not affect the functionality of the program. They are just an information for the programmer. And then I always like to rearrange my curly brackets like this. So I have the opening curly bracket after a function name, or the function parameters to be specific. And then I like to have the closing curly bracket at the very beginning of the first line after the body of the function. So this is like the skeleton for an expert advisor. It just has three basic functions: the onInit function, the onDinit function, and the onTick function. These functions are so-called system functions. They will be called by the MetaTrader 5. So if we compile this program, this will then automatically create a executable for us. And we will find this executable in the MetaTrader 5, where I am now, if you click on Expert Advisors in the navigator. So here we should find the zigzag expert as soon as we compiled the program, and we can automatically, or we can then double click it and attach it to the chart, and we can then click on OK. And you can now see here in the upper right corner there is zigzag expert, and this program is now active, which means that the onInit function will be called whenever the program is initialized. The onDinit is called whenever it is deinitialized or removed from the chart, for example. And the onTick function is called for every single tick. And what we want to do now is we want to receive the indicator values. And we can, or whenever we have an indicator, like this zigzag indicator, we need a handle for this. So we can create a so-called global variable because it is outside of any of these functions. And this variable has the type integer. An integer variable can be any number, like these numbers, that does not have a decimal point. So this is not an integer, no integer, but all of these are integer numbers because they do not have a decimal point. This would be a double value, for example, because it has a decimal point. So now we have this global variable which we called handle. This name, it doesn't have to be handle. It could be dog or cat or Peter. It doesn't really matter, but it always makes sense to choose a name or a name pretty much for a variable that also explains what this variable shall hold. So which value it shall hold. Then we write a semicolon to close this line, and this is the declaration of a variable. We can now jump into the onInit function, which is called whenever the program is initialized, which means that this function is called when the program is activated on the chart or when the parameters change, like the inputs. Here we can now use the iCustom function. And the iCustom function, you can look it up in the reference, which you can open by clicking on F1. And if you click on your keyboard, Or if you click on help MQL5 reference, and then you can go to index and search for iCustom, and there you will find an entry for the iCustom function. It is a function that is part of the MQL5 framework, so you can use it right away and you do not have to define it on your own. Here you will find a lot of explanation stuff for the parameters. This iCustom function has at least 3 parameters, and it returns a handle of a specified custom indicator. So this is why we will have this handle variable, and we will store the return value of this iCustom function inside of this handle variable. So what we will have to define here is we have to define some parameters in the parentheses following the function name here. So the first parameter is the symbol name, and we will choose underscore symbol like this, because this is a system variable that always holds the name of the current chart. For example, if we activate this program on the Euro-US dollar chart, the underscore symbol variable will hold the value Euro-US dollar. So this is a way of telling the iCustom function for what specific symbol we want to have this indicator calculated. Then the second parameter is the time frame, and it can be any value chosen from this enum time frames enumeration. So you can choose any of these values here pretty much. So for example, period current, period M1, period M30, period D1, period H1, and here you will find the description on the right side, like the value this ID holds. So for example, if I choose period current, it will always take the current chart time frame. And then we have to provide the indicator name. And this is a string value, so a text value like this. So we can choose this name variable here, and just compile the program. So this will pretty much, it will compile, but it doesn't really make sense because we did not provide a name. So let's have a look at this. We downloaded this arrow zigzag indicator, and what we will do now is we will have to search for the path starting in the indicators folder. What does this mean? So we have to click on File up here in the upper left corner, then we click on Open Data folder, and this will open the folder of this MetaTrader 5 installation. Then we can click on MQL5, and there we will find the indicators folder. And this is pretty much the folder that defines the things we can see here in this indicators section. So if you compare them, you will see these are pretty much the same. So, So we have examples, we will have market, and we have all the other indicators that I have here. For example, the Donkin channel, the martingale grid signals, another Donkin channel, and the super trend. And these are the things displayed here in the navigator. So we will click on market, and there we will find this arrow zigzag EX5. So this is the executable that is used to draw this custom zigzag indicator in the chart. So what we can do is, easiest way is to just copy this, and now we will have to use the path starting in this indicators folder as the name for our iCustom function. So the path is pretty much market and then the name of the indicator. So we can write it like this, market, and then 2 backslash, and then arrow zigzag EX5. So if we compile this, this should work. If our arrow zigzag would not lay inside of this market subfolder, but instead it would lay here, then we do not write this market, but we just write the name of this indicator. So since we did this now, we now have the iCustom function, we use the iCustom function to create a handle. Now we can go into the onTick function and calculate the values of this indicator. So what we will do here is we will have to create an array, We can call this, for example, indi for indicator, and this is a double array. So we already learned that double values are any values that have a decimal point. So all of these are double values. And if we have a look at the chart, we will see that the prices also have decimal points, so they are double values. And this is why we can store the indicator values in a double array. What is an array? An array is pretty much just, it means that we do not have only one value, but we can have multiple values. So if we do not write these squared brackets, this would mean that we only have like one variable where we can put one value inside. But since we provided these curly brackets here, squared brackets, this means that this is an array which can hold multiple values. And we can now use the so-called copy buffer function to receive values from an indicator handle. And this is the first parameter of this copy buffer function. It is an indicator handle. And this is great because we have an indicator handle here, which is named handle. So we provide this as a first parameter. Then we have the buffer number. And this is like really important. So you can see we have this zigzag now in the chart. And if you have a look at the data window, which you can open by clicking on view data window, you will see we of course have all the information for the bars. If we move our cursor here, you can see, for example, for this long bar we will have a open, high, low and close price, but we also see this arrow zigzag, height and zigzag low values here. And these are there, these lines are there because we have an indicator in the chart. And you can see if I move my cursor over a bar which has a arrow, these three lines or some of these lines are filled with data. So if we move over this red arrow, the first two lines here will have data. If we move over the green arrow or the bar with a green arrow, the first line and the third line will have a value. And for most indicators, the indexing for these so-called buffers are as I say now. So the very first line usually has the index 0. The second one has the index 1 and the third one has the index 2. So it just starts like this. You always start counting with 0 and then you just increment the number by 1 for each following line. So now our copy buffer function, it requests a buffer number. So for example, we can choose buffer number 1 for the red arrows. So what we will do here is we will say something like indi red. So we can say buffer number 1 for the red arrows, and we will start at position 1 and we will have a count of 1. And then we store these values in the indi red array. And now we copy these two lines and we say we also need a indi green array. And we leave everything as it is, but instead of buffer number 1, we will choose buffer number 2 because the green arrow values are displayed in this row here, which has the index 2. And then we store the values in the indi green array. And yeah, these two parameters just define the starting position and the count. So the starting position always is defined starting at the very right side. So the current bar would have index 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, this would be 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So we want to have the value for the last bar. So for this bar here, which now has the red arrow on top of it. And yeah, these values will now be stored inside of these arrays. So what we can do here is we can have a comment where we just output the values from these arrays. So in the red, and we say in the red, and we have the value stored at index 0 of this array. Then we move to a new line and display the indi green value. So indi green at index 0. So this comment function is another function which is part of the MQL5 framework, and it will display values in the upper left corner, or information in the upper left corner of the chart. So what we can do see here is, in the upper left corner, we will now see that indi red has the value 1.08642. And if we move our cursor over this bar with the red arrow, we will see that this value is displayed here in the data window. So we now found a way to find to receive the values from arrows displayed in the chart. And we can do this by using this iCustom function. So all we have to do now is we will have to search for the previous arrow pretty much, because what we figured out is that the last arrow is not really reliable. So we will have to search for this green arrow. And since we do not know how many bars to the left this green arrow appears, we will have to use a loop for this. And we can use something called a for loop. And yeah, please use it like I do here. And we can do something like this. So we write for, and then we have in brackets 3 operations for this loop. So the first one, before the first semicolon here is, and I can make this a little bit bigger, the first one says int I equals 0. So this is just the declaration of a variable, which we did before. So we create a new integer variable, which is named I, and it has the value 0. This variable will stay alive for the whole time this loop is active. And then the second one is the condition. And this is between the first and the second semicolon. So this condition is checked before every run of this loop. So the condition is I is smaller than 10,000. And you can choose any big number here. You could choose 10,000 or 100,000 or just 1,000 would be enough. But yeah, let us choose 10,000. So whenever I is smaller than 10,000, this condition is true, and we will enter the body of this for loop, which is in between of these curly brackets. And this body is executed whenever this condition is true. And after the execution of the body, we will then move to the post condition pretty much, which is after the second semicolon here. And it says I++, which is just I plus 1. This is just another way of saying I shall be increased by 1. After we did this, we will then check the condition again. And after the first execution of the body, I is now increased by 1, so it is 1, and it is still smaller than 10,000, so we would execute this loop again, and then we would increase I by 1 again, and we would enter the body again because I is then 2, which is still smaller than 10,000. So like this, we would execute this loop 10,000 times. And this is not really necessary because we just want to execute it as long as we did not find this second last arrow pretty much. So what we will do is we will say or we will create 2 variables, I think, or we can, yeah, let's just choose like index last or index current, and this is 0, and index last, which is also 0 first. So this is the index of the current arrow, which is this red arrow, and the index last, it shall hold the value of this green arrow. And the current index is now index 0 because this is above the current bar, and this is, green arrow, it has index 15 because it is 15 bars to the left start when we start counting at the very right bar. So let's have a look at if we can find these indexes. So we will say index current and index last. And we can say index last and index current, like this. If we compile this, we will see 0 and 0, of course, because our loop doesn't really have any useful content now. But what we will do here is, we will now say that we want to receive the value for the same buffers as before, but we will start not at 1, but at position I, because I will always be increased. And what we will do now is, we will check if index, or if in the green or in the red is greater than 0. It's greater than 0. Let's see if this works out. And in this case, we want to check if index current is, no, this will not work. We will have to say -1 and -1. So we will have to check if index current is smaller than 0. In this case, we say index current is equal to I. And if index current is already greater than 0, then we can be pretty sure that we found the index of the last arrow here, which is then I. And if we find the last index here of the last arrow, we can then use a break as a command to leave the for loop. So if we compile this, we should now see the index current, which is 0 for this red, and 15, as I said before, for this green arrow. So we now find the second last arrow. And what we can do now is, we can do several things. So first of all, we can say that we want to find the direction pretty much. So we can say index direction, or signal direction, which is by default 0. And we can say signal, or we can create a global variable, which is named, which is a datetime variable, which is a time. And this is last signal. And now what we will do now is, we will, when we find the index of the last arrow, we will check if in the green is greater than 0, or if in the red is greater than 0. Because if the green arrow appears, we will have a bisignal, so we can say signal direction is 1. And if we have a red, we can say signal direction is -1. And what we also want to do is, we want to have the or I think we do not even need the signal direction variable here, because we can just open the position right away. So what we want to do is, we want to check if or we want to receive the time for this bar where the last arrow appears. So we can do it by using the iTime function, and then we have underscore symbol, period current, and the shift value I, because this will give us the time of this bar here. And then we can check if time is greater than last signal, because we do not want to trade a signal twice. And if this is the case, then we want to have we want to open positions. And we also want to update the last signal variable afterwards. So let's put this into our comment here. Last signal and we can print the last signal. So if we compile this, you will see we will now have in the upper left corner the timestamp of this bar where we had the last signal. And now we just have to open a position. But before we want to do this, I will explain one more thing for the iCustom function. I should have explained this before, but as I already said, this indicator or any indicator can have inputs. And if we change these inputs, of course, the expert advisor will need the chance to also change the inputs. So what we can do here is we can provide these inputs as parameters for the iCustom function. And this is why there are these three dots here, because this is a list of indicator input parameters. And the order is always like it is listed in the indicators inputs tab here. So we will have the depth, we will have the deviation and the backstep. So 12, 5 and 3. So we will have to provide it in this exact order. So we will have 12, 5 and 3 like this. And we can change the values here. So for example, we could say 15 or 10 as a second parameter, because this will be then applied for the calculation of the expert advisor. And this is, you can use this for any for any indicator. So if your indicator has only one parameter, you can provide only one. If it has 20 parameters, you can provide 20 parameters, but make sure that you keep the order as it is in the list of the indicator inputs. Okay, so since we now figured out these signals, we can say, for example, if there is a signal, we want to print something like function new by signal at, and then we can have the time here printed. And we can say new cell signal if we have a cell signal, like this. So if we compile this, we can now run this in the strategy tester and see if it works. So let's open the strategy tester, just press Ctrl and R, and now click on Overview, and now we want to have a visualized backtest for a expert advisor. So here for the expert, choose Zigzag Expert. This is the expert that we just created, and then you can click on Start. And you will see this will simulate the expert advisor with historical data. We should then see in the journal that there are trading signals because we added this print statement. So what we see here is we have in the upper left corner the last signal, which should be this timestamp. And as soon as we see a new signal, we should see another signal here. Whoops. So what we can see is there's a new buy signal at the 5th of January 2015 at 0 o'clock, and this is this buy signal. And we saw this signal at the 6th of January 2015 at 4 o'clock and 34 minutes, which is 4, somewhere in this bar here. So somewhere here we saw the new signal. So if we have a new signal now, we should get a new sell signal. So okay, so the one thing that is left is we will have to create positions now. So what we do is we include the ctrade class. So we just write it like I do here, because we can now use the ctrade object or a object of type ctrade like this. I will declare this on a global scale. And we can now say if we have a buy signal, we can say trade.buy, and we can open, for example, 1 lots in this market. And for the sell signal, we can sell 1 lot. And before we do this, we maybe also want to close the previous position. So we can say trade position close for the current chart symbol, like this. So if we start this program again, this should now already work. So as soon as this loaded, we can have a look at the signals and the execution. So let's see if we see signals, if there is a new signal. So we should see a buy position then, and there it is. There is the buy position, and it was closed, and there is a sell position as soon as we get the counter signal pretty much. So you can see the market is falling, so we're making some profits, and we will close this position as soon as there is another buy signal, which will appear. Whoops, let's wait some more time. So there's a buy signal, and we'll close the sell position and start or open a new buy trade. So this is pretty much how you can use any indicator. For example, this custom zigzag indicator. So yeah, the most important thing is that you just define this the indicator handle using the iCustom function, and you always have to provide the symbol, which is usually the chart symbol, which you can get by using the underscore symbol variable. Then the time frame, you can just choose period current if you want to have the current chart time frame, and the name, which is the path to the indicator executable file. And then in the right order, all the input settings for this custom indicator. And then you can use this handle to use the copy buffer function to receive the indicator values for all the buffers it has. Again, the buffers are listed on the left side in the data window, and this is always buffer 0, or not always, but I think in most cases. This should be buffer 1, this should be buffer 2, and so on and so on. And yeah, once you use the copy buffer function for this, you can then check if there are values and what the values are, and then you can make your trading decision based on these values. And yeah, for the zigzag, for example, it makes sense to use like this kind of loop where you find the current arrow and then the previous arrow, and once you found this previous arrow, then you can execute a trade and store the time stamp of this last signal, because you do not want to execute any signal twice. So this is it. This is how you can use the iCustom function for custom indicators in MT5. Hope you liked it. You can use this for any indicator, so just play around with it. There are plenty of indicators in the market that you can now download and explore. So have fun with it, and I will see you next time. Until then, have a great time and good trades. Bye bye.